Hey everybody, this is Perch. Uh, I don't know why I start so many of the videos that way. Like, hey everybody, it's Perch. Why is it so hard for new comic characters, new comics to get off the ground? And I think we kind of avoid that question a lot, but it's true. If you look at the independent comic scene, you have a lot of established creators, people who, when they were writing for the big two, were selling 100,000 copies of a comic. Brian Michael Bendis comes to mind, Jason Aaron comes to mind. I would say Donnie Cates, but I don't know what boat he's crashing these days. Um, People are like, what did he say? Yeah, yeah. It's hard to like look. I mean, there is a trophy unlocked if you manage to somehow crash a boat in Texas. Like that is you, good for you, man. You are doing something improbable there. Anyway, and you might go, oh, you mean like on the coast, like near Galveston? No, I'm talking about inland. You crashed a boat, and you weren't near an ocean. What? What? Okay. Anyway, um, a lot of independent comic creators, or sorry, mainstream comic creators who've gone into independence, Rick Remender, and I like a lot of Remender's comics. I think he does a great job with many of his comics. I mean, there's hits and misses for sure, but a lot of those independent comics don't sell well. As many of you who have followed this channel know, I'm a big fan of Ghost Machine. I think they do really great comics. Whether you love Jeff Johns or hate Jeff Johns, or you bought into the controversy of Jeff Johns or whatever, Geiger, Hyde Street, these are good comics. Like Ghost Machine is firing on almost all cylinders. This is a really good imprint of comics. And if you're not reading those, you need to. For the love of God, Jeff, reach out, please. You need marketing. Like you may think you have it, and God bless you. Maybe it's a childhood friend who's doing your marketing right now, but fuck, your marketing sucks because you are putting out incredible comics, and nobody, and I mean nobody, knows they exist. It's tragic to me. How you're putting out amazing work. Like some of the best comics out right now are Ghost Machine comics, and it like you go into a comic shop and people have no idea that you exist. You desperately need a channel manager or marketing. Like you need help because you've done it. Your comics are great. Now get them sold. God damn. But a lot of independent comics, they don't move the needle at all. And it is striking to think of a guy like Brian Michael Bendis, who for a period of time at Marvel, I know a lot of you are thinking about the Civil War II and, the DC work, but for a period of time at Marvel, if Bendis's name was on the comic, it was selling north of 80,000 copies and usually above 100,000. Bendis was House of M sold really, really well. So did Secret Invasion. These comics did great. His reimagining of New Avengers and Mighty Avengers and all that kind of stuff, the Dark Reign, he ran Marvel for all intents and purposes. He did a great job. It is hard. And again, a lot of you hate Bendis because of what he did with John Kent and other things, but he put numbers on the board like very few people have. But I'll use a different example. Scott Snyder, a guy who refuses to come on this show. No, I'm kidding. He says he will come on someday, and we will all hold our breath, and one day he will be here. No, Scott, look, I love you to death, man. Please, will you just stop going on Sasha's show? Like, grace us with your presence, man. Come on. Nobody's going to cancel you for going on my shitty show. Nobody even knows it exists. So please, come on, man. Don't do this to me. Don't be a Tori Amos song. You gotta be part of this. But anyway, Scott Snyder, he goes to DC. He's put out, we have 2 issues of Absolute Batman out. It's selling well. he goes into the independent side of the world. He goes and does the stuff for Comixology. He does the stuff for, oh God, what is that company that I don't even remember. That's how bad it is. Not his work, but the publisher. The Comixology guys who try to do their distillery. Distillery. I don't know how to say it. You just have to leave a couple letters out of the word. But it doesn't move copies. It doesn't sell well. The comics are not bad. Like if you read some of those, they're perfectly fine comics. I don't think they're any worse than what he does for DC, and yet they sell 1/10 of the copies. And you could easily explain that by saying, well, yeah, but I mean, he writes Batman. Batman's a new character, and so therefore, it's going to sell more. I mean, that's fine. That's the cheap answer. It's the easy answer. But the question is, it's 2025, and the comics that are selling well are, the perennial favorites are Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, X-Men. It's the characters that had their start in the 60s and the 70s. Yeah, I mean, sorry, for Superman, much earlier than that. Same with Batman. But still, what new character, brand new character, outside of the big two? So not standing on the shoulders of giants, not leveraging, like Miles Morales is popular, but Miles Morales would not have existed were it not for Spider-Man. So what characters outside of the big two have sold massive amounts of comics? And the answer to that is Invincible. Okay. Walking Dead? Maybe. I mean, it sold a lot of copies, don't get me wrong, but that's a little bit different in terms of a brand. I mean, Kirkman won't do it, but if right now Kirkman's like, fuck it, I'm restarting Invincible. I know I ended the series, but we're doing it again. And in the first issue, he goes back in time and he has to relive his life, and then we're just doing comics again. That comic would sell north of 50,000 copies, especially if you got Ryan Otley on art. It would. What other independent comic can claim that? Saga? I mean, Saga sells like shit these days. Spawn? I love Todd McFarlane, and I know a lot of you like Todd, but Spawn doesn't sell huge copies. Spawn is sitting in the, last I checked, 18 to 20,000 copies range. What independent comic is selling those kinds of numbers? Conan's doing okay. I mean, look at your hand right now. It's got 4 fingers and a thumb. Can you name 5 comics in the last 20 years that are not Marvel, not DC, that actually are putting up massive numbers for a character, for an IP? Again, you have Invincible. That's been helped by Amazon. You've got Walking Dead, and that barely counts because it's a zombie story. I mean, the cast of Walking Dead is popular, but if you did a spinoff title called, Rick, would it sell? Michonne, would that sell? I mean, actually, we've tested that. It doesn't. So what new characters have sold, and why is it so hard? We should have had another Batman by now. We should have had another Spider-Man, but the reality is we haven't. We haven't had a new breakout character in a long time. I was talking about this with somebody, and they're like, well, what about Deadpool or Harley Quinn? I'm like, I mean, okay, but Deadpool was introduced in the early 90s. Now, do you want me to be a dick and count up the years? We're more than 30 years. 30 years since Deadpool was introduced. Harley Quinn, same thing. Who else we got? Miles? I agree, Miles is popular, but Miles was heavily leveraged from Spider-Man. Does it count? It doesn't. On the independent scene, who? We've got a lot of talented creators out there, but who? Almost every major comic writer has done a independent comic series. Again, Snyder has, Bendis has, Aaron has. Lots of these writers have. Which ones have worked? The problem we have to face in comics is that no new character is really having a breakout right now. I mean, I'm doing the experiment with you now. Please help me in the comments. Who am I forgetting? And by the way, keep in mind, I'm talking pure sales. I guarantee you that several of you in the comments were like, "Well, I like this comic." Cool. I'm glad you do. I like a lot of comics too. I've said it on this channel many times. The example I always give is I love David Lynch. God rest his soul. He made amazing movies. I loved his art. I loved his style. I loved the way he constructed films. I think he was a brilliant, brilliant filmmaker. He didn't, in none of his films are blockbusters. Zero of them. It doesn't mean I like him less because of that, but it's important that you separate what you personally like from commercial success. So, from a commercial success standpoint, who's winning? What character out there is doing an amazing job? Who? Any? I think what I'm trying to impress upon you is that it's unnatural. The fact that we haven't had breakout characters. I mean, in the '60s, like if you think about Marvel, in the '60s, you had the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, the Avengers. You had like the House of Ideas was spinning off IP and characters that would last us 50 years, 50 years. More. I feel fairly confident it's 2045. Marvel has decided to reboot Iron Man. The grandson of Robert Downey Jr. is playing this character. Like, they're going to be still mining the characters are created 100 years earlier in movies. And that's cool. They should make money off of it. But the question is, why haven't we created new characters to play in that space, to compete? Who is the character created in the last 10 years that will last another 50? Who? I mean, I may not be thinking it properly, but outside of Invincible, and even that is a stretch. I love that comic. I love that character. Amazon has breathed life into that character. It's raised the value of those comics. It's raised the profile of Mark Grayson. Cool. But if I fast forward 50 years, are people going to be talking about Invincible? I don't know. I think that's a maybe. Probably not. Who else is in that spot? I isn't this weird? Does anybody else find this weird but me? We should have had new breakout characters by now. We haven't. And I do not prescribe to the argument that comics is dying and it will go away and everything else. But if I was to give one really solid argument as to why comics were in trouble and could die, it's this. We have not seen any new major breakout characters or stories in a while. So we haven't seen a massive amount of them. Do me a favor, search comic books 1960s. And I think you'll get a Wikipedia article. You get a few different things. And just look at the amount of characters that are created from the 60s to the 80s. It's 99% of what comics are today and what's being used by Hollywood today. And guess what? If a character is created in 1964, do I need to do the math for you? Like, it's been half a century since a lot of these characters were created, and we're still using them. What have we done in the last 20 years? Anything? Well,